When you spawn into a typical Minecraft world, there's tons of different things you can choose to do. But what if you spawned into a world where there was only one thing you could do? Well, that's exactly what OneBlock Skyblock is. So today, I'm going to try to survive 100 days in OneBlock Skyblock in hardcore Minecraft. To start things out on day one, there weren't really that many options to choose from, so I just started mindlessly punching the block in front of me. After getting a few pieces of wood, I made a crafting table, and because I am such a professional Minecrafter, I turned my planks into slabs so that I could start expanding and be at least a little bit more efficient with the limited resources that I had. After I made a decent platform, I started punching the block yet again, and eventually a pig spawned. Lucky for them, I had already expanded the platform enough, so there was room for both of us, and I was not forced to punch them off the edge, at least not yet. I kindly elbowed them out of the way and just got right back to work. Soon I came to a chest with a bucket of water in it, and I used that to get under the platform and place some dirt directly below the chest so I'd stop losing all those overachieving blocks like sand and gravel that, for some reason, felt the need to be affected by gravity. Those guys are such downers. Right? Get it? We're starting off strong with some really good jokes here. After some more block breaking, I completed the tutorial phase and entered the plains phase. While waiting for the phase to actually start, I expanded the platform a little bit more and placed down 3 of the saplings I had gotten from the chests so I could start getting some actual resources. As the day turned into night, I continued breaking the block, and by the time the sun had completely set, I was just surrounded by a horde of animals creepily watching my every move. I decided it was getting a bit out of hand and arguably a little bit creepy with all these animals watching me in the dark, so I just made a small fenced-in area behind me and shoved all the animals right in there. This was definitely violating a bunch of farming codes and probably health codes, but you know what? I was the only one in this world, so I didn't have to care about any of that. I could do whatever I wanted. I could shove as many animals in that stupid little pen as I wanted, and I was gonna do it. The sun started rising on day 2 right as I got to chop down my first tree that had grown from the 3 saplings I had planted the night before. I also had just finished the plains phase and was now on to the underground phase. Seeing as how the first block was stone, I made a wooden pickaxe to gather that stone, and the second I got 3 pieces, I made a stone pickaxe and just chucked my wooden one right off the edge of the platform. I guess being stranded in the sky does have some perks, considering it's basically one giant trash can for all the junk you don't want. I returned to breaking the block with my fancy new pickaxe, and eventually I got 2 pieces of iron that I would need to make shears. I made a furnace, put the iron in with some of the coal that I had gotten, and then made the rest of my basic stone tools. While I waited for the iron to smelt down, I placed down some chests and just dumped all the random junk from my inventory into them. I snagged my iron ingots from the furnace, made some shears, and immediately sheared the sheep and made a bed. I chopped down some trees, returned to breaking the block, and a mushroom ended up spawning, which was awesome because it meant I had infinite food. It wasn't necessarily the best food, but it was infinite food, and that was definitely something that I was going to need. Eventually, my first mob ended up spawning, and I was attacked by a zombie wearing this sweet leather hat, but unfortunately, he was no match for my stone axe. Right before the sunset, a creeper spawned, and my kill was... let's just say it was less than clean, but at the end of the day, it got the job done. Day 3 was just more of the same as I continued to break the block and eventually got attacked by 2 zombies this time, where both of them were rocking sick leather hats. So either these zombies were like super insecure about being bald or something, or I was just missing out on some leather hat trend and I was the loser here. Now that more mobs were spawning, I decided it was time to employ my expert hardcore strategy to close in the block to trap the mobs as they spawned. I started out by expanding the platform in every direction so I'd have at least a little bit of room to work with, and then I dropped the floor around the block that was spawning the mobs down by 1. I started building the walls up around the block and fenced in the front with a gate so I could get in and grab the loot whenever I wanted, but I didn't have to worry about all the mobs coming out and actually killing me. I ended up being short on both resources and didn't actually have any wheat or carrots at this point to move my animals elsewhere, so this kind of scuffed setup would have to do for now. Day 4 started the trial phase for my mob containment unit Mark 1, and it seemed to be working pretty well. I was even able to defeat a creeper without it blowing up part of my base, which meant I was now 1 for 3, but I was trending upward since I hadn't been able to do that yet, so all hope was not lost. I mined a bit more and ended up completing phase 2 and moved on to the icy tundra phase. I ended up getting a fair bit of iron ore while I was mining, so I tossed that all in a furnace and further expanded the platform while I was waiting for it all to smelt down. I also planted the 3 spruce saplings that I had gotten from the chest at the end of phase 2, since I had decided I wanted to use spruce wood to build with instead of regular oak wood. I grabbed my iron ingots out of the furnace and made my first set of iron tools. I finished off the day by starting to push through the icy tundra phase with all my newly made, fancy, shiny iron tools. I woke up on day 5 to some spruce trees that had grown, so I started out by chopping those down and used that wood to expand my platform to the next level. It took me a bit of time to work out a design I liked, but it really came together when I did as Cookie always suggests in his 100 days videos, and I just threw some leaves on it. I built up the new layer of the platform and moved my tree farm up to the new section so I'd have a bit more room to work with. I ended up planting both spruce and oak saplings since I would need both types of wood if I wanted to continue building, at least with the same style I had used so far. Now that I had a bit more resources, I also built up my mob containment unit, put a roof on it, and got rid of the fence on the back wall so it was finally complete. Day 6 was very similar to day 5 as I spent most of the day just chopping down trees as they grew and then using that wood to expand the platform even more onto the second layer, just in a different direction. I used the same exact design as I did on day 5 because honestly guys, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And on top of that, my Minecraft OCD would have made me lose it if everything wasn't the exact same. So to those of you that also have Minecraft OCD, you're welcome. And to those of you that enjoy asymmetry, I don't understand you guys. I used this new area to make a small farm on one side for carrots and eventually wheat once I actually managed to get some wheat seeds, and then started making a new pen for my animals on the other side. Day 7 saw me return to my menial job of repeatedly breaking the now expertly contained block. I fought a few sets of mobs, but eventually stopped mining the block as a bunch of my trees grew. I chopped down all the trees, and if you can imagine, I went to continue building up the platform on another side. Since the base was starting to grow to an actually decent size, I figured it was time to at least add a little bit of light to it so that mobs didn't start spawning if I forgot to sleep for some reason. I slapped down some torches, called it a day, and went back to mining. I finished off the day by making a new best friend, which is really all you can ask for in a day. Can anyone guess how I started day 8? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Oh gosh, I hope someone got that reference, but yes, I started off by chopping down all the trees that had grown and building up the last side of the platform. I decided to take a break from building and went back to breaking the block, but was almost immediately greeted by my first monster party. They quite rudely broke the roof off my mob containment unit, but other than that, it worked pretty flawlessly. I went back to breaking the block for the rest of the day, managed to make yet another friend in the process, and day 9 ended with me completing phase 3 and moving on to the ocean phase. As if it's a surprise to anyone, I used day 10 to finish expanding the final platform and used the ice that I got from the chest at the end of the icy tundra phase to make an infinite water source. I used some of my iron to make an extra bucket and used my newfound infinite water source to fill in the corners of the fancy wall that I had set up on the first layer of the base. I polished off some of the remaining mess around the base and finished off the day by just returning to mining more of the block. On day 11, I chopped down some trees and started expanding the second layer further into the corner. I decided to spend the next few days planning out how I wanted the structure that would go in the corner to actually look, and I settled on a spruce wood and stone brick design. I had to repeatedly chop down more trees as I was working since I continued to run out of resources, but after many iterations, I finally had a design that I liked. I lined the walls with chests as this would be my new storage room and got to work on the roof. I wanted to give the build a little bit of color and maybe some life to it, and was very happy with how the leaves actually ended up looking when they were combined with some slabs and some glass. To wrap up all the building on day 14, I made some item frames, slapped them on each chest, and called it a day. Day 15 was moving day, which of course everybody hates, including me, but it had to be done. I started out by lighting the storage area up with some torches and spent the entire rest of the day hauling stuff from my random dump chest in the center of the base over to the storage area. I tried to keep all the chests relatively general since the storage area really wasn't all that massive, and I suspected I would come across a lot of different types of blocks by the end of Phase 10. And for those of you who are wondering, I did in fact dump all the randomly named chests into my storage and never actually ended up using them simply because their names bothered me. I couldn't get past the idea that they had all these random names, so they do in fact stay in here and just build up and up and up more and more throughout the rest of the video and never ever get used. On day 16, I returned to mining the infinite block and started to progress through the ocean phase. I routinely went back and forth to my storage area to dump all the blocks I had mined as my inventory filled up, and it felt so nice being able to stay at least semi-organized for once. Eventually, some guardians spawned, and they were so annoying to deal with since I had no form of ranged weapon yet. At the end of the day, an elder guardian spawned, and I used my limited arrows to kill it, but not before it gave me some sweet mining fatigue, which made me feel like I was 80 years old and pretty much barred me from doing anything. Day 17 started out quite boring, as I still had to AFK for a little bit longer to let the mining fatigue go away, but once it ran out, I was back to breaking the infinite block. After a fair bit of mining, another monster party spawned, but I managed to fend them off just fine with my last few arrows that I had. Unfortunately, I yet again got mining fatigue from the Elder Guardian that spawned, so I was left to AFK for the rest of the day until it ran out. The next few days were just a lot of the same. I mined the infinite block, fought off the annoying guardians that spawned, and then AFK'd every 5 minutes after Elder Guardians spawned and decided to ruin my day with mining fatigue. Eventually, I got through the ocean phase and was so happy to enter the jungle phase because at least it meant there were no more Elder Guardians. Unfortunately, that happiness was pretty short-lived when a bunch of Vexes spawned. I cannot express in words how much I hate Vexes. Oh my god. Day 21 started out with me breaking the infinite block, but very quickly took a turn for the worse. A witch spawned and poisoned me, which brought me down to half a heart and forced me to sit out of view and just wait because I was so afraid of dying. I managed to kill the witch, but it was clear that I really was not equipped to deal with more, so I used my massive brain and the horrible Minecraft AI pathing to my advantage and simply dropped the next witch into the void by mining the slab directly below it in the corner where they congregate. I used this clearly insane and overpowered technique on the next witch that spawned, and I even used it on the monster party that eventually spawned in at the end of the day. On day 22, I was determined to get my hands on some wheat seeds, so I took the remaining grass block, placed it down in a patch of dirt, and just started bone mealing it and breaking the tall grass that spawned in, hoping that it would eventually drop me a wheat seed. It took way longer than it should have, but I finally got a single wheat seed. I feel like usually I get way too many of these when I'm not wanting wheat seeds, and I just am breaking grass, but this time it just didn't want to give it to me. I planted the seed in my small farm area, bone mealed it a few times, and eventually filled in all the remaining plots of land with wheat seeds. I then used the wheat and carrots that I had to move all the animals from their initial pen to the one that I had made across from the farm. With the animals moved, I was free to tear down that initial pen they were in and finally clean up that area. Day 23 and 24 were just mining days where all I really did was mine the infinite block and kill the mobs that spawned. I would absolutely freak out every time a Vex would spawn since, again, I absolutely hate them, but a lot of the time they would just fly away never to be seen again, so I mean, it made it pretty easy. I also dealt with a fair bit of witches that all just got dumped straight into the void. I'm not going to say this tech is my biggest achievement in Minecraft to date, but if I did say that, I wouldn't be that wrong. At the end of the day, I made my diamond pickaxe and planted the piece of bamboo that I got from the fat black and white bear that I unfortunately did in fact kill. The next day, I expanded the bamboo farm and started to set up a small sugarcane farm right across from it. My iron axe broke while I was working, so I went and made my diamond axe, and then I came back to finish off the farm. I also entered the red desert phase and went back to mining to finish off the day, and right as the sun was setting, I was blessed with my very first villager, who went by the name of Martha. Oh, sweet Martha, who I eventually stuck in a boat to just sit and wait. Day 26 started off rough as I mined the infinite block and ended up getting 2 wandering traders, one after another. I kept hoping for a second villager, but instead I got their cursed cousin, who had to unfortunately be dealt with properly. While I was mining, my iron shovel broke, so I upgraded my final tool from iron to diamond and got right back to work. If you can imagine, I was actually quite pleased when a monster party spawned, as it was preferable to another wandering trader, and it turns out the technique I used to kill the witches also worked really well on other mobs. Who would have guessed? And yet again, as the sun was setting, I was blessed with another villager who went by the name of Owen. Owen also got trapped in a boat. Now that I had 2 villagers, I needed a place for them to live, so I spent days 27 to 30 building a duplicate of the storage area in a different corner of the base. I wanted to keep the villagers inside, so I covered one wall in glass and then put a front door on the other. I put down some beds along with a fletching table and a lectern before lighting up the area and just shoving my villagers right over into their new home. I spent day 31 breaking and placing the lectern back down until I got a mending trade, and then I did some trading with the Fletcher just to start building up some emeralds that I would eventually need to use to trade for all those mending books. I figured that mending and an XP farm would be critical due just to the lack of resources available in this world. I placed down a 3rd bed so the villagers could make a baby, and at the end of day 31, that is exactly what they did. I started day 32 by chopping down and replanting all my trees, and then went right back to mining. A few illagers and husks spawned, but they didn't really put up much of a fight at all. By the end of the day, I completed the red desert phase and went to bed as I waited for the timer to tick over and start the next phase. I entered the nether phase on the start of day 33 and decided it was time to make some upgrades to my mob containment unit Mark 1. I raised the walls and replaced the roof with the hope that it would be high enough now to not get destroyed by any other monster party that was going to be spawning. I also placed a wall behind myself so that any blaze that spawned would be at least a lot less likely to light my entire base on fire. I got to mining and quickly came across my first few pieces of ancient debris. It wasn't enough to upgrade any tools yet, but it was a start, and I didn't even have to go to the nether for it, so I was more than happy. I fought my first blaze, and although it didn't light the entire base on fire, it did catch a few things, so I decided to replace the floor of the mob containment unit with some stone brick slabs instead of wood slabs. I had really been slacking on harvesting all my farms, so I spent the morning of day 34 chopping down trees, breaking bamboo, and harvesting all the extra sugarcane that had grown. I did some more mining and managed to get 2 more ancient debris. This brought my total up to 4, so I immediately went and smelted them down into netherite scrap, crafted a netherite ingot, and upgraded my diamond pickaxe to a netherite pickaxe. I went to take it for a spin and ended up spawning in a monster party right as the day was ending. It was definitely an eventful party and reminded me that fences could also be destroyed by fire. The next morning, I went and immediately replaced the rest of the fencing with stone brick walls to avoid them burning down during another monster party where I very well might die if things actually managed to get out and attack me. I went back to mining and quickly came to another blaze, and although it didn't light the base on fire, its random shots did make it past my wall, so I went and made it even larger just to try and have a better chance of catching them all. I finished the day by chopping down some trees, harvesting my crops, and breeding all my animals. I spent days 36 to 39 making the building in the 3rd corner of the base that would eventually become my enchanting area. While I had already built this exact building twice, it still took me ages to make it properly, and once the exterior was done, it was time to fill the interior. During the building process, I took breaks to harvest my bamboo, convert it to sticks, and trade them for emeralds, and then I used those emeralds to buy some bookshelves. I also harvested my sugarcane to make more books and used the obsidian I had gotten from the nether phase to craft an enchanting table. Although I didn't have all the bookshelves I needed, it was a pretty solid start. I was so motivated from finishing building the 3rd corner that I decided to take on the task of completing the final corner with yet another version of the same building that would eventually house my XP farm. I managed to shave a bit of time off the platform expansion and building of this one and completed it in only 2 days. With the 2nd layer of the base complete, I started expanding to a 3rd layer, which I planned to initially use as a much larger tree farm than I currently had. I needed more space than I had at the moment for my tree farm because I wanted to use oak wood to build my XP farm, and that meant collecting around 7 stacks of oak logs. I definitely could have just made a cobblestone generator and used that, but I wanted the base to actually look nice, and that meant chopping down trees. Lots and lots of trees. At the end of the day, I managed to collect just enough resources to make the final bookshelves for my enchanting setup, and enchanted both my pickaxe and my axe, which both came out pretty sweet with the enchants on their first try. Now that my tree farm was expanded and ready to go, I spent the next 3 days cutting down tree after tree after tree, replanting the saplings, and just sitting back waiting for them to grow. My diamond axe was nearly broken right out the gate, and I was low on resources, so my plan was to not do anything other than chop down trees with a stone axe until I had my XP farm up and running and could use mending on each and every one of my tools. After 3 days, I had all the wood I could need and was ready to start building my XP farm. I spent days 46 to 50 building the actual XP farm. Chances are you've seen a farm like this before. It's really nothing special, but it's easy to set up and will work wonders, especially in a world where there are no caves you have to worry about lighting up. I messed up the sizing of one of the sides and ended up having to tear down a bit and rebuild it, but in the end it wasn't all that hard to make. Before closing off the roof of the spawning area, I made sure to place down slabs to prevent spiders from spawning. I know, this would have reduced the rates a fair bit, but it would prevent any clogging from spiders without having to adjust the entire setup, so it was a solid trade-off in my opinion. I closed the roof and made my way back down at the end of day 50. I spent the next day farming some XP from the mob farm and sorted out all the loot into the chests in the room. Although the farm was nothing crazy, I was very happy with the rates I was getting for XP, and I was pretty confident I would have overpowered gear before I even knew it. Over the next few days, I returned to mining the infinite block after my extended building hiatus and continued farming mobs for XP at my XP farm. It was so much nicer being able to use my new bow and infinite supply of arrows to deal with all the different mobs that spawn. Majority of the time, there really was no need for me to even use a bow to kill them, but after 50 days of not really having any arrows, I was set on enjoying every moment of it now. On day 56, I finally went and traded with the librarian for some mending books and put mending on both my axe and my pickaxe so I wouldn't have to waste resources repairing them. I enchanted my new diamond sword, and after a few tries, I actually got a pretty sweet set of enchants. I also had enough diamonds to craft a diamond chest and got protection 4 and unbreaking 3 on my first try. After all that enchanting, I ended up finishing off the day by killing mobs to repair all my tools that I had put mending on. With a fresh set of tools in hand, I returned to the infinite block for some more mining over the next 2 days. After many trips back and forth between the storage room and the infinite block, I had enough netherite scraps to craft another netherite ingot, and finally was able to upgrade my axe from diamond to netherite. I also managed to get to the Desolate Lands phase while I was attempting to not get a garbage enchant on my new diamond pants. Sadly, Protection 4 was not in the cards for me, no matter how many times I tried to enchant them, and I eventually just gave up. I decided to go back to what I knew and broke my first few blocks of the new phase, and figured out it spawns silverfish. Silverfish, seriously. I was pretty much done after finding that out, and just decided to go to bed for the night. Although I didn't want to spawn more silverfish, I only had 2 phases left, so I spent day 59 breaking the infinite block again. Although I didn't get any silverfish spawned, I did get 2 evokers, and that was a little bit bittersweet for me. It was sweet because I would get 2 totems of undying that I desperately wanted, but it was bitter because they spawned vexes, and as I stated multiple times earlier, I hate vexes. I managed to kill them and decided it was time to tear down the wall behind the spawner, since at this point, I was no longer spawning Blazin and it was just causing more harm than good. Now it was hunting season in the base, and no mobs were going to be safe from my bow. I slapped a totem of undying in my offhand, made a diamond helmet, and stored the other totem away for later, just in case I had a little accident. I spent days 60 to 62 doing some pretty uneventful things. I mined the infinite block, fought some mobs that didn't even challenge me now with my overpowered gear, and killed mobs at the XP farm in hopes of eventually getting a mediocre enchant on my diamond boots, pants, and helmet. It was looking like I was going to have to resort to crafting the perfect pieces from scratch, since I couldn't get any good enchanting base other than what was on my chest from the first enchant I ever did on it. At the end of day 62, I moved on to the final phase, the end. On day 63, I killed a bunch of mobs at the XP farm, still with the high hopes of getting some better enchants on my gear, but unfortunately fell short and ended up just doing some trading to get more mending books, and then applied those to all the pieces of gear that were already set to go with all the regular enchants. I did manage to enchant my helmet with Protection 4, and since that was the only thing on it, I was able to use an Unbreaking 3 book that I got in combination with my mending book to apply both of those and pretty much complete my helmet, so at the end of the day it wasn't a total waste. Days 64 to 66 were spent progressing through the final phase by mining the infinite block. Thankfully, plenty of endermen spawned, and with my looting 3 sword, I had more than enough ender pearls to make Eyes of Ender for the portal once I eventually got there. I also got a few shulker that spawned, and although it was really annoying having them teleport all over my base, I was happy to finally be able to craft at least one shulker box just in case I ever needed it. Partway through day 66, I completed the end phase, and I'm going to be honest, I got totally jump scared by the portal spawning and breaking the floor of the mob containment unit, but thankfully I wasn't standing in there, so everything was all good. I spent the rest of the day fixing the floor and making a small hatch to safely make my way down to the portal once the time eventually came for me to go in and actually kill the dragon. The next 2 days were spent again trying to upgrade my gear now that I was nearing the dragon fight. I tried my hand at a few more random enchants but got really fed up with it and went to get a villager to just trade for Protection 4. I figured I could pretty easily get Unbreaking 3 on the armor, but Protection 4 would be a lot more difficult to enchant, so I decided getting a trade for those would be the best way. It took 2 days of breaking and placing the stupid lectern, but I finally managed to get Protection 4. I'm pretty sure I saw mending more than like 10 different times while I was doing this, which made me cringe since it took me like a full day to get the mending trade on my first villager. Now that I had mending and Protection 4 from the villagers, I spent days 69 to 71 farming XP and trading for emeralds with the Fletcher so I could eventually buy all the books that I would need and just finish off my remaining gear. I ended up converting all of my excess wood into sticks to trade, but in the end, I got all the books I needed and was able to enchant all my gear with Protection 4, Unbreaking 3, and Mending at a minimum. I also had Feather Falling 4 on my boots, which was a huge plus because I tend to fall from a lot of places. Like a lot. With my gear enchanted, the next step was to upgrade it all to netherite gear, and to do that, I would obviously need netherite. My plan was to use the bed explosion mining method in the nether, but for that, I would need lots of sheep. So I started expanding another platform just like I did with the tree farm and made a pen to move my sheep into. I made sure the floor was made out of dirt and just slapped a grass block down in the middle so that it could spread and the sheep could actually regrow their wool from eating the grass. It really wasn't anything fancy, but it would definitely get the job done. I spent day 74 doing some farming to get all the wheat that I would need to breed the sheep, and then semi-AFK'd at the sheep farm for the rest of the day, repeatedly shearing and breeding the sheep whenever I could. I figured 2 inventories or so of beds would be a solid start since some of my tools were already upgraded, so I was gonna need a fair bit of wool. Unfortunately, my grass was not spreading fast enough, so I had to keep the population of sheep that were in the pen a little bit lower than I would have liked to avoid them eating all the grass and screwing up the pen. After getting all the wool I would need, it was time to go to the nether and put the beds to good use. Unfortunately, I didn't have a nether portal set up yet, or really even a good place to put one, so I spent the next 2 days expanding the base even further. I placed down my fancy square nether portal in the middle of the new platform, and placed down a bunch of nether blocks around it to try and blend it in a bit better with the current base. By the end of day 76, I was happy with how it looked, and went to bed before embarking on my ancient debris mining expedition. With my inventory and a shulker box full of beds, I entered the nether for what would end up being a 9-day explosion mining trip. I mined down to a Y level of 14, which I had recalled seeing in a video was the best level to do this explosion mining, and just started placing down beds and blowing them up. I got super lucky and my first explosion actually unearthed some debris. Sadly, and a little bit of a spoiler alert, my luck was not going to continue, if the 9 days didn't already hint at that. I made it all the way to day 85, just placing beds, blowing them up, and then shamefully failing really at clearing out the lava. By the time day 85 ended, I had run out of beds and only had 14 ancient debris to show for it. Since I had 4 pieces of gear and 2 tools that needed netherite ingots, I was going to need 24 ancient debris in total, meaning I was unfortunately 10 short. I was not about to admit defeat, so after many days of explosion mining for debris, I wanted to see if just strip mining was better since I had a really nice pickaxe to mine, and so I spent days 86 to 92 strip mining in the nether just like I would have in the overworld for diamonds. It definitely wasn't the most fun thing, and I was having a hard time telling if it was more efficient, but the fact I didn't have to spend forever attempting to block lava to see if there was even ancient debris there made it 100 times nicer than what I had been doing before. I returned home on day 92 with the exact 24 ancient debris I would need to upgrade everything that I had, so I smelted it down, crafted it into ingots, and then upgraded all of my armor and tools. I spent the last bit of the day at the XP farm trying to repair every piece of gear with mending on it, and as the sun set, I was now fully equipped with the best gear that I could possibly want. Now it was time to take care of some pretty miscellaneous tasks before taking on the Ender Dragon, and I figured it couldn't really hurt to have some potions ready to go in case for some reason I ended up needing them. I made 2 brewing stands and placed them down in the enchanting room, and then used those to make some splash potions of healing too. Chances are I would not need these at all because I did have a totem of undying and, quite frankly, super overpowered gear at this point, but I wasn't about to risk dying on day 99 because for some reason I decided to be unprepared. I spent day 94 chopping down all the trees that I had let get super overgrown over the last 20 days or so where I just didn't even touch them, which honestly was because I wasn't even in the overworld to do that. But either way, I was debating not even replanting the saplings because it took so long to clear them out every time they fully grew. I figured I was low on wood after turning it pretty much all into sticks for trading earlier, so I did end up replanting them and managed to fully replenish my wood reserves with the 4 total stacks or so that I had gotten from this massive lumber chopping session. On day 95, I realized I really had no good source of food as I was eating some random cooked fish, so I made another pen across from the sheep pen and also made the ground dirt and put some grass in it to spread. I grabbed some of the leads I had gotten from killing various wandering traders and their llamas and led all of my cows over to their new pen and started breeding them for more food. Days 96 and 97 were spent sitting, staring at my cows, watching them breed. In a totally not creepy, not call the police kind of way. I honestly forgot how long the timer was between being able to breed animals and had to wait ages to get any appreciable amount of cows actually in the pen. I figured I might want more wool at some point if I end up continuing this series past 100 days if you guys liked it, so while I waited, I just seared some of the sheep in the nearby pen. In the end, I got a fair bit of cows bred, but none of the babies had grown up yet since apparently Minecraft wants us all to wait 500 years before we can kill the animals and get loot, and because unfortunately I was stupid and forgot that I could feed them some of the wheat that I had to speed it up a bit. I ended up ditching the plan of getting myself some sweet steak for the Ender Dragon fight, and in the end just resorted to grabbing the golden carrots that I had stashed away from random chests that spawned while I was mining through the earlier phases. With 1 day left before taking on the Ender Dragon, I decided to try to get a better bow since 95% of the damage I typically do to the dragon is from arrows being shot from a bow. I'm not sure if everyone's like me, but that's definitely how I do it. I farmed some XP at the mob farm and started enchanting with the hopes of getting infinity so I could at least clear up my inventory from all these arrows that I had put in there and possibly get maybe power 4 so I could combine it with my current bow to get power 5. It took a bit, but in the end, I got a bow that had everything I could possibly want on it and then some. I was able to combine this with my current bow to get an infinity, unbreaking 3, power 5, punch 2 bow that would absolutely destroy the dragon. It was now day 99 and time to take on the Ender Dragon. I crafted some Eyes of Ender and went down my hatch to the end portal. I clearly overestimated how many I would need and really only had to use a few to open the portal, and I just jumped right in. I bridged over to the island and started slowly clearing out the crystals that were healing the dragon. I'm not gonna lie, I was actually pretty impressed with myself with how smooth the process went, since I'm usually really horrible at hitting these, but at this point, I was just convinced my overpowered bow also had some kind of aimbot on it, and that's why I was able to clear them all out so quickly. Once they were all cleared, I fired an embarrassingly large amount of arrows to eventually kill the dragon. I wish I could say that there was some cool stuff that happened, but honestly, it was all pretty tame. I guess that is the unfortunate part of having super overpowered gear. You don't really get any great exciting content for YouTube. After the dragon died, I collected all the XP and went home. It was nearly the end of day 99, so I watched the sunset, laughed as I noticed I was finishing the video with 69 levels, and went to bed. It was now day 100 and the challenge was over. Not only did I manage to survive 100 days in OneBlock Skyblock in hardcore Minecraft, but I also made an awesome base, got nearly perfect netherite gear, and killed the Ender Dragon. I could not have been more pleased with the progress I was able to make, and could finish this challenge off proud. And with that said, that is it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. This video took me about 50 hours to make in total, so please, if you did enjoy it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And also, let me know if you'd like to see me do 200 days in this same world.